Okay, so today's workshop is called Change the Way You Parent by Changing the Way You Think. Learn the essential foundations of thought work. And thought work is one of those powerful things that, we don't really think about very much. We don't really understand how impactful all of our thoughts that we think every day, all day long, are impacting how we feel and how we behave, and ultimately the results we get, whether that's in our parenting, the parenting style that we have, the relationship we have with our kid, the way we are relating to stress or overwhelm or work or things like that, and how that carries over into our everyday life in our family and in our home. So when we start to see, the link between our thoughts and everything else in our life, what it does is it gives us a lot of agency and power to actually change the trajectory in a lot of different areas. And so I'm always so passionate about teaching this, and so I'm excited to bring it to you today. One of the thought leaders that I follow and have read many of her books and listen to her all the time, her name is Byron Katie, and she has written one of the books that I really love is called Loving What Is. And we'll talk at the very end about Byron Katie's methods as far as thought work, but I do love this quote from her where she says that placing the blame or judgment on someone else leaves you powerless to change your experience. Taking responsibility for your beliefs and judgments gives you the power to change them. And so what that means for me is that instead of, looking outside of myself for problems, if I can actually take account with how I'm thinking about the challenges or thinking about someone else's behavior, I can actually change the way I feel about it and then change my relationship to those things versus trying to change other people or place blame or cast judgment on other people for how they're behaving. So, the idea here is that our thoughts are so powerful. Every single feeling, action, and result that we get in our lives begins with a single thought. So, becoming aware of our thoughts is the first step to creating the life that we truly want. So, our thoughts are not facts. We often take them to be 100% true and facts, but they are actually just sentences that we have created in our brain to create meaning out of our circumstances. So, we make them up and then we just believe them full-heartedly, and then all of our emotions and behaviors and everything else follow from those thoughts.
So
Um,
when you say that part, it resonates with Erin's plan about facts. Remember when we were working with, those negative thoughts that she was having, now it's coming back and
mhm.
versus thoughts. So yes, it does resonate with me now.
Yeah, yes, totally. And I mean, when teenagers learn this stuff, I mean, it really changes so much about how they're relating to, the opinions of their friends or, the thoughts they have about, a grade that they got in a class. So how we think about any challenge that we're facing or any quote unquote mistake or anything like that, it's going to completely change how we feel about it and therefore change how we move forward. So, the basis for this work comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. They have something that's called the TEB cycle, and TEB stands for thoughts lead to emotions, emotions lead to behaviors, and then ultimately our behaviors lead to our results. And so they're all linked. What we often think is that a circumstance happens in our life. Say, for example, our teen is having a huge meltdown, right? That's a circumstance. They're having a meltdown, and so my emotion is I'm stressed. So the circumstance happens, right? My teen is having a meltdown, and then my emotion that follows is that now I'm stressed and I'm angry, or I'm, not knowing how to respond because I'm feeling overwhelmed by this. And so we often think it's circumstance leads to emotion, but there's something between the circumstance and the emotion, and that is the thought. Circumstances by themselves are neutral, right? So one circumstance for one person is going to be experienced completely different than the other person experiencing that circumstance. For example, if it's snowing outside and I look out my window and there's like 3 feet of snow, my thought might be, I hate the snow. This today's going to suck. I'm going to have to drive down the mountain in the snow and everything's going to be hard, right? So that's one thought, and that's going to lead to emotions of stress, anxiety, frustration, lots of different things. Someone else might look out the window at the snow and say, "Oh my God, it's going to be an amazing day. I love the snow. I'm going to have so much fun on the mountain snowboarding this weekend." and their emotions are excited, anticipatory, anticipation, joy, right? And so it's not the circumstance, it's what we think about the circumstance that then creates our emotion. And so it's not that our teen is melting down that is creating stress and worry and overwhelm for us. It's that our thought is that, oh my God, this is too much for me. I can't handle this right now. And that then creates the emotion of stress, overwhelm, and whatnot. Another thought you could have when your teen melts down is, wow, they're having a really hard time right now. I'm going to give them some space. So that is going to create a completely different emotional environment than the other one, right? And now all of a sudden your behavior is going to change because your emotion's different, because whatever emotion you have, that then drives the behavior that you have. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, you might be like, stop freaking out. This is too much. I can't handle this. But if you're feeling calm and the thought was, they're having a moment, but it's not about me, I'm going to give them some space, your behavior might be to remove yourself from the room, do some breathing yourself, come back later, bring them a snack, completely different result. So now instead of us exploding even more, everything is de-escalated and we can actually address what's going on underneath, right? So the thought that we think is so, so powerful in how we feel and how we act. So my question for you is, can you think of a time that the thoughts you were thinking impacted your emotions, your behaviors, and ultimately your results, either positively or negatively? And it could be related to parenting or it could just be in general.
So like I'll give one as a parent. In the past, when Erin would have those quiet moments, you would think that, what are you sad about, right? But over time, and we've been discussing, because I'm quiet does not mean that I'm sad. So now I know, okay, she's having a moment. She wants some me time. So I don't, the old version of me would come in and try to, but she doesn't need that. She just needed space.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought was that she was sad and I thought I needed to do something. When
Mm-hmm.
in fact is I just needed some space, mom,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah,
know? So
totally. Beautiful example. And then a completely different result
mhm,
afterwards.
mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And this is happening all day long. So whenever we are experiencing those moments of, you know, turmoil in the relationship or like over fixing or whatever it is that we're doing, if we trace it back to what's the thought I'm thinking about this, right? And then we can start to do some work with the thoughts. And we're going to go into how we can start to actually shift those thoughts once we recognize them. But the first step is always to notice. So it's the mindfulness around what are the thoughts that I'm thinking? Because there are lots and lots and lots of thoughts happening every day that are happening in the background and we're not even aware of them. What we're aware of is the emotions that come after. Like we all of a sudden we're angry, right? Then I know, okay, I'm having a thought about something. What is the thought I'm thinking? And so we start to notice that cause and effect. So if I'm feeling some big emotion, I can think back to what is the cause? What's the thought I'm thinking right now? And according to the research of Dr. Fred Luskin of Stanford University, a human being has approximately 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And of those thousands of thoughts, on average, for the average human, 80% of them are negative, and 95% are the same repetitive thoughts as the day before, which is crazy, right? I mean, that's a lot of negative thoughts. And, that's in large part because we all have our default mode, which is our negativity bias, right? Negativity bias is the fact that we make stronger and faster neural connections around negativity. And that's because our brain's job is to keep us safe and alive. So we're always scanning for problems so that we can be ready, right? And so it makes sense that the majority of our thoughts are negative if we let them go on autopilot. But what it means is that if we don't want to have negative emotions all the time and negative behaviors and negative results, then we have to really have a lot of awareness. Okay, what are the thoughts? And then start questioning and reframing thoughts so that they can create,
Erin
the
brought up this the statistics, so you must have covered it in the content because
Hmm.
so like I would say probably like 3 years now, or probably more, maybe more. Um, like my attitude towards work, I try to not be in a negative space because if you start your day in a negative space, like I try to find the positives. I mean, at the
Hmm.
end of the day, this is how I'm able to keep a roof over my head, right? So I've been very deliberate. So, like I always tell friends, don't come to me with your negative energy because it's like, this is what we have to do. So we have to
Hmm.
figure out a way to make it comfortable, and then
Hmm.
Erin and I, we were driving to martial arts and something she brought up, and I was like, why do you always start like remember the negative stuff? And then she told me this, so she must have remembered it in the session. But it's not a reason to be negative. It's the natural inclination, but you
Hmm.
should try
Yes.
to to
Yeah.
to come out of that space.
Right. Yeah. And just to know that, like, yeah, that's how we're going to lean naturally. And
Mhm.
if we don't want to lean that way, then we have to actually do some work. And
Yeah.
Byron Katie, who I mentioned her quote at the beginning, the thought work that she does, she calls it the work. It's the work of Byron Katie because what that means to me is that this is like a life work. Like it's an everyday practice where we have to always be kind of conscious and aware of what are the thoughts I'm thinking, how are those thoughts making me feel, how are those thoughts making me act, and what results am I getting. If I'm not liking my results, the best way to change my results is to trace it all the way back to the beginning and how can I change the thoughts I'm thinking. If I can change those, then I can change everything downstream, right? So here's an example. Normally, we have mindless automatic TEB cycles. So the TEB cycle, again, is thought, emotion, behavior cycle. We normally are in mindless automatic mode. And what we want to move towards is mindful, intentional TEB cycles. And so in both of these examples, it's the same circumstance, but a different thought. And so you can kind of see how it can change everything downstream just by changing the thought. So the circumstance here is your tween or teen says something you perceive to be rude and disrespectful. Um, I consciously did not put your teen says something that is rude or disrespectful because again, that's a thought, right? So something you perceive to be rude or disrespectful, and your thought is, they are so out of line. I'm so tired of this BS. Okay. Now the emotions are angry, frustrated, annoyed, and maybe even hurt. Behaviors, yell at them, avoid them, give a big and unreasonable consequence, or give angry vibes the rest of the night. Okay. And then the outcomes, an explosive fight, tears, everyone's angry, upset, and more disconnected than ever. Right. So that's how it can go. Right. And I'm sure we've all had those moments. I've definitely had this exact scenario play out in my own home with myself. So this is a human response when we feel disrespected, right? Now, if we switch it over to the conscious, mindful, intentional TEB cycle, same circumstance. This time, we might have started with that thought, but if we catch it before it takes us down the spiral, we can reframe it. And a new thought we might think might be something like, ouch, right? It doesn't feel good to have someone talk to me that way, right? So it doesn't feel good. So, ouch, but this isn't about me. I wonder what's happening under the surface for them right now, right? I wonder if they had a bad day. Like they wouldn't be lashing out at me unless something was going on, right? And so now my emotions are bummed that it happened, but more neutral and a little concerned about them. My behavior is to let them know that I can tell that they're upset. So we're going to take a pause so we can calm down and we'll talk about this later. So because I'm staying calm and rational with my thinking, I can now stay calm and rational in the behavior. And then the outcome is that everyone has time to calm down and later the conversation goes well about what's going on for them and what's not acceptable behavior. So later I can come in and say, hey, I can tell you're having a hard time, like what was going on. And then also, when you're having a hard time, it's not okay to take it out on me like that, right? And so we can lay that boundary down later when everyone's calm versus like in the heat of the moment, you can't talk to me like that, which is gonna not work, right? Does that make sense? How we can shift that?
It does, and I would say that with our program that we've worked, this is where we are now. Like you told me at the top of this, um, don't respond to the behavior, understand what's causing the behavior, and that has really helped.
Mhm.
to work through the process. While I may not have understood from what deliberately what I was doing, based on the coaching, I would say that. So now I have the tool, right? I have the full tool, but when you told me don't respond to the behavior, understand the why,
Mhm.
that broke down, that basically it changed course, like how you respond to.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Okay, so I want you to try this yourself. So I want you to think of a circumstance. And so if you have paper and pen, you can do it, or you could just kind of walk it through in your head. But think about a circumstance where maybe you have gotten an outcome. And again, this could be related to your teen, or it could be a work example. Really, it works with anything. It's just the idea of practicing this. So any example where maybe you got an outcome that was not great because maybe your emotions were heightened, your behavior wasn't really in line with how you wanted to act, and then the outcome wasn't great. So that would be your mindless automatic. And then you use the same circumstance, transfer the same circumstance over, but change the thought and see what happens underneath. Okay.
So, last quarter was rough. Erin was she was loaded with different activities, right? And as a parent, I mean, we like to blame devices and we like to blame. So it's very quick to find a reason for the why, you know.
Hmm.
So the thought was you have too much access to device time, the emotions, you upset, you say things, right?
Hmm.
Then there's the clash.
Right.
Um, the outcome was basically a complete shutdown. And
Hmm.
that's when, I reached out to you and we started the program. Okay.
Hmm.
So then, with mindful intention, this kid is overwhelmed. And that's when um, I sized up what her quarter looked like. She had the writing competition, she had martial arts, and she had track. And I'm very pro academic. So in there, she had extra lessons for mathematics because I think mathematics is a universal language and you need to be like at the top of your game for it.
Hmm.
So she had maths in there. So she's totally shut down. My thought was, okay, something's wrong. The formula's wrong. The kid's overloaded now. And then I started to, what could have been removed from her plate, I clawed it back. I reached out to her math coach and I said, you know what, Erin's doing well in school in this. I think she can take a pause. So she took like a 4-month pause on that. So that took 2 afternoons off the calendar, and she was able over time with the reduced loading and as activities fell away, you saw that it's not that she doesn't want to do stuff and that she's not passionate about stuff, everything. And then everybody wants her to be at the A standard in everything at the same time. So it's not that she genuinely hates the things, it's the overwhelming feeling and that, I don't want to disappoint anybody.
Hmm.
That really was the root cause.
Yeah.
So, taking away that, well, you need to be that person that, is amazing at everything all the time, taking away that on from her
Hmm.
shoulders really did help as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So instead of like, I hear that the original thought was something along the lines of, this kid has too much screen time and her behavior's out of line. And then the new thought is, this kid is overwhelmed.
Hmm.
I need to help support
Hmm.
reducing the schedule and
Yeah,
all of that. Which then all of a sudden you're feeling like instead of feeling frustrated and angry, you're feeling more empowered,
right.
and solution focused, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge.
yeah.
And look where it brought you. Like, for both of you, right? A long
Yeah,
way.
definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. And so you can do that with anything, right? So anytime that you're getting a bad result, like walk through that whole cycle. Where what thought can I change and what emotions would that help me with? So one of the big thought thinking errors that we get into are something that's called cognitive distortions or automatic negative thoughts. This is something I teach the teens, so Erin would have learned this as well. Um, but cognitive distortions are irrational thoughts or biased perspectives that can have a significant impact on mental health. And these distorted thinking patterns can lead to low self-esteem and amplify feelings of anxiety and depression. And they are not just fleeting thoughts, they're deeply ingrained styles of thinking that can become the architects of our emotional turmoil. And so they also can become self-fulfilling prophecies, reinforcing the very thoughts that created them. So it's a vicious cycle. A distorted thought leads to negative emotions, which in turn fuel behaviors that serve to validate and perpetuate the cognitive distortion. So it's a really bad TEB cycle to be in, that when it starts off with a cognitive distortion. And these are things that we all do all the time. So very human to have these types of thinking. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you some examples. The cool thing about cognitive distortions is that they have labeled hundreds of them. And so what that means is that we can identify them easier. So when I say, notice your thoughts, if I already know, like, mind reading is a cognitive distortion, and I know that I'm mind reading right now, I can catch it easier and be like, oh, that's not true. It's not a fact, right? So it's easier to catch it and reframe it. So this is, it looks like I have 10 different examples here. These are some pretty common ones. So another word for cognitive distortions is automatic negative thoughts. This is how I teach it to teens, because then we can just say, your ants. It's really easy to say, like, your ants are going crazy again, right? Like, what are your ants doing right now? So I'm going to read through some definitions here. And as I do it, I want you to pay attention to, like, which ones are your most common ones. See if you can come up with like your top three. So all or nothing, this is where you see things in black and white categories. So if your performance falls short of perfect, you see yourself as a total failure. Overgeneralization, you see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. Mind reading, thinking we know what other people are thinking, making assumptions without evidence. They think I talk way too much and that I never shut up. Negativity bias, the tendency to ignore positives and focus only on the negatives in a situation or in your life in general. Blaming or denying, this is where we assign guilt or responsibility for how we feel to someone else. It's their fault that I messed up. And then catastrophizing, this one's really big for parents and anyone with anxiety. This is where over-exaggeration leads to worries escalating to the worst case scenario. So my kid is 5 minutes late, so they're on the side of the road. Something's horrible has happened. Yes, moms, moms are catastrophizers. I was doing it just yesterday. Emotional reasoning. You assume that your negative emotions reflect the way things really are. I feel it, therefore it must be true. And then should statements, using the words should or shouldn't towards yourself or others. They shouldn't even ask this. They should know better by now, that kind of thing. And then emotional reasoning. Is that the, oh, no, I missed that one. Okay, the next one I have on here is labeling. This is an extreme form of overgeneralization. Instead of describing your error, you attach a negative label to yourself. I'm such a loser. I'm such a bad parent. Um, they are just lazy, that kind of thing. And then personalization is where we take things personally, assuming that we have been intentionally excluded or targeted. All right. Any of those stand out to you?
Well, we know catastrophizing is definitely some negativity bias in there and mind reading as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally. So I have a few examples here of like how these play out like as parents of teens. Um, so some different thoughts that we might have. All or nothing might be something like, I lost my temper with her once this week, so I'm a terrible parent. We're really hard on ourselves. Overgeneralization, he rolled his eyes at me again today. He's never going to respect me. Mind reading, she thinks I'm so lame and that I talk way too much. When our kids become teenagers and they start rolling their eyes at us every other minute. Labeling, I'm such a pushover as a parent, or he's just lazy. Should statements, she shouldn't need me to remind her about this at her age. Negativity bias, all he does is argue with me about everything while overlooking the mornings he got ready without a fight or the times he opened up in the car. Blaming, denying, if she wasn't so difficult, I wouldn't have yelled. Catastrophizing, he's 10 minutes past curfew, something terrible must have happened. Emotional reasoning, I wouldn't be this angry if you hadn't done something wrong. So these play out, and you can see, like, I mean, any of these thoughts are going to lead to a negative emotion, which is probably going to lead to a behavior where we're not like in our best, highest parenting self moment, right? And we all have those moments. We're not trying to be perfect parents, but the more we can catch these things, the better our relationship's going to be and the better we're going to feel. So the better our team's going to feel too. So you mentioned a few of your top distortions. So maybe thinking about one of them, think if you can come up with a thought that fits in that category that you have on the regular, and then what could you replace that thought with? What would be a better option?
Is it for any of the options? If you can go back to the screen with the list.
Yep. Yeah. So do you want this one or the other
Yeah,
list?
this one is good.
Okay. Yeah. So any of the ones like you mentioned three, so you could have like a catastrophizing example or a mind reading or whatever you can recognize.
There's so much, and then nothing's coming to me for this one.
Can you think of a time, like for example, think of a time that you catastrophized recently and what your thought was?
Well, I think I have these moments about schoolwork all the time.
Okay, what
So
would be an
we
example?
have two books to finish read ahead of summer program, and it's not done
Hmm.
yet.
Hmm. So is the thought like if I don't finish this, then what happens?
Well, Erin needs to finish two books ahead, or else she won't be ready for her book reports for school. And
Okay. All right. She needs to finish this or she's not going to be ready. Okay. And I'm guessing that thought creates stress for you.
yes.
Okay. So then how could you reframe that thought for yourself? Because she's the one that's getting the consequence, right?
Hmm. Help me with this one.
Well, I would think like, sometimes it's like we take on the stress of like our kids not doing something well. But what if we were to like separate it out and say, um, you know, I'm gonna do my best to support her getting this done, but if she doesn't get this done, then she's gonna have to experience the natural consequences of it, you know,
How my
which is
husband thinks, but my brain, I can't get my brain to think that way. But my husband says this all the time, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, no.
Mhm. But sometimes, I mean, like especially as she's getting, into her high school years, it's like our job is almost to start releasing some of the pressure and take our feet off the gas pedal
Hmm.
and allow them to fail, right?
Right,
Because if she can't figure it out how to hold herself accountable, and then also like what happens if I don't follow through, like what happens for me,
right.
and figure out how that feels for herself so that she can, learn from those mistakes herself and build her own resilience. Because if we're always hopping in to fix or
Hmm.
support so much,
Yeah.
then she can't learn those skills herself either and feel like what it feels like to not succeed at something, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, I'll take that.
It's not easy
Takeaway.
though for us control freak moms, you know. We have to hold on tight, make sure everything goes as planned. Yeah. Yeah, so the thought can even be like, it's okay if she's not perfect. It's
Mhm.
okay if she doesn't get a perfect grade and she can navigate that. She's strong enough.
Right.
Okay. So something along
Okay.
those lines.
Okay.
Okay. So we did that one. All right. So some questions that we can use to reframe our ants or cognitive distortions. So when we're stuck in one that we know we're noticing, hey, this is not a thought that's helping me right now. We can ask ourselves, what evidence do I have to confirm this? Right? Like this has to get done, or her whole, college career is ruined if she doesn't get her summer book readings done. What evidence do I have to confirm this? Are there aspects of the situation I'm not seeing? Is there a middle ground or gray area that I'm rejecting? Is it realistic to hold myself to these expectations? Is it realistic to hold my teen to these expectations? Would somebody else also arrive at the same conclusion? And then this one I think is the most important. What's the overall effect of how I'm thinking? If this thought is making me feel bad and act bad, then it's
Mhm.
probably something I want to shift, even if I can't, get answer any of those other questions, right? So um, one coach that I've learned a lot from, her name's Martha Beck. She's written a lot of books, but she talks about how our biggest indication that we need to make a change or that a thought isn't working for us is when we're suffering. So the suffering is a clue, right? So I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm overwhelmed. That's suffering. If I'm
Mhm.
suffering, something needs to shift, right, in order
Right.
to change that experience. And if we can start with the thoughts, then I can often help to remedy that suffering, right? Because I'm often putting myself in this turmoil with the thoughts I'm thinking. So if I'm able to shift the thoughts, I can reduce all of that. Okay, which brings us back to Byron Katie. So one more little bit of thought work and how you can work with these things. She has a website too, so you don't even have to read her whole book, but she's got lots of material. But she has these really four powerful questions. So if there's a thought that's really like keeping you stuck or it's really creating distress, you can walk yourself through these four questions and then what she calls the turnaround. So the first question is it true? Is it true that Erin has to get these two books done by the end of summer, or she's going to completely be unprepared and going to have a really horrible next year, or whatever the thought is, right? Is it true? And then a lot of times in our mind, we're like, yes, it's true. Yes, this person's like, not acting correctly, or yes, this is going to be a horrible result. And so then the next question comes, which is, can you absolutely know that it's true? And so this is where you're like thinking like you have to present this in a court of law, right? Could you prove this with evidence? Like this
Right.
is a fact, right? And if it's not a fact, right, then we can remind ourselves, oh, it's actually not true, right? It's not true if it's not a fact. Um, and then the third question is, how do you react when you believe that thought? Right? So what feelings, what emotions come up for you? What behaviors happen for you when you believe this has to get done, right? And then the final question is, who would you be without the thought? So if you were able to completely let that thought go and you no longer believed it, who would you be? Would you be more peaceful? Would you be more free?
Yes.
Would you be in less turmoil? Would you have a looser grip? All the things, right? And so we walk ourselves through that and it kind of, it can shift some very, very powerful questions. I mean,
Mhm.
if you read her book, I mean, she talks to people who have been abused, who, have had family members murdered even, and she has them work with their thoughts, and it's quite miraculous. She'll sit people on a stage and do this with them, and they'll be like, "Oh my God," just have these epiphanies about these things that have been like keeping them in so much
Right.
turmoil for so many years. And so the final step in her process is after you've answered those questions, you come up with a turnaround for the thought. And this is a sentence that is like the opposite of the thought or some variation. you kind of play around with it till you find one that feels true for you. So, for example, if the thought is he doesn't understand me, the turnaround could be I don't understand him, or I don't understand myself, right? So you're finding something else that is an alternative. And so in her work, it's the opposite or something along those lines. But and like the TED cycle or any other thing that you're doing, really, it's just finding your next best thought. Like what's the next best thought that would serve me more right now? But I find her work to be really, really helpful. Okay, so final little reminders here. Your thoughts are not facts. They are just sentences in your head that you create to make sense of your circumstances. You get to choose your thoughts, and every thought you think will either positively or negatively affect your emotions, your behaviors, and your outcomes. Okay. So, are there any thoughts that are no longer serving you or your team that you'd like to let go of that you could identify right now?
At the top of the program, when I first started, I genuinely thought Erin did not like me, because you're having these clashes. She would say things, but then you realized over time that it's not that, it's that she's dealing with things and she just doesn't have the words, the right words to express what those were. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a thought that I've let go
Mm-hmm.
in the program, that it's not hate towards me. It's navigating, all these things that have been changing and, her being better able and better equipped to deal with those things. And then you saw, the response towards me improved.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Mhm.
Congratulations. That's a big one to let go of. Right? Because I know it's like we can really like take their behaviors so personally,
Mhm, mhm,
That's
mhm.
like the personalization
Yeah,
distortion, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one. Awesome. Okay, one final piece. This is one that I teach the teens, but I think it's good for all of us, is that we can reverse engineer thought work in order to accomplish things that we want to accomplish. And so if you have a goal in your relationship or you have a goal in your personal life, something that you're striving for, the way that you can do it is you start with what is the goal that you want to achieve, and then you imagine if I achieved that, what would the success or result be? And so we're going from the bottom up, right? So say my goal was I want to get promoted at my job. Success or result would be I got promoted. Like it happened. I got promoted. And so then I have to think about, okay, if I were to actually get that result, what thoughts would I have needed in order to get that result and create that result for myself? And then what emotions would I be feeling if I was thinking those thoughts, and what behaviors would I be having, which would ultimately lead to that. So you can really like walk it back.
Right,
If like I want the promotion, if I'm thinking thoughts like they'll never hire me, I don't have what it takes, they like my coworker way better, right?
right.
It doesn't line up with the result. You're going to have emotions that are like feeling unsure, not confident, probably a little bit apathetic because why bother? And then your emotions are all those things. That's the
Mhm.
emotions. And then your behaviors are you're not going to put in the effort. You're not going to, um, put in the extra hours or whatever it is because you don't actually believe you're going to get it anyway, right?
This is actually something I'm working on in my professional life because my well, it's not a merger. They were acquired by another bank. So I'm doing coaching as well, professional coaching. So I know where I would like to be. So it's like I have to dissect and, in not, yes, I know what my end game is, but obviously the mile markers, they described it as being able to itemize what those mile markers are to get to the ultimate goal. So that's something I'm working on right now.
Nice. Nice.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep. So you can use all this in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay. All right. That brings us to the end. What's standing out to you from everything we talked about?
when that thought comes in your mind, being able to manage that process and not let it get to that next stage, but being able to identify and understand what's happening and that shift, the behavior shift that comes with it.
Hmm. Yeah, amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah, this one, I think this thought work, I think was the biggest part in my ability to stop being so reactive to my
Right.
kids. Like when I really started to notice like the thoughts I was thinking, I could really
Hmm.
shift that, which allowed me then to de-escalate myself, which
Right.
then, of course, de-escalated all of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
so much that can happen from this. You
Yeah.
start a whole new career. You can do all kinds of stuff if you have the right thoughts,